I did not experience a single book slump in 2025, and I am certain that that is because I was constantly changing genres. I wasn't just reading inside of my comfort zone, and I was pushing myself to read books that I usually wouldn't read. It made 2025 my best reading year yet. If you are in a book slump right now, or you feel like you're constantly in and out of book slumps, I can guarantee you it's because you're reading the same types of books over and over and over again, and nothing's really feeling exciting anymore. But do not worry, I have so many good book recommendations here. There is something for absolutely everyone in this pile of books. Let's just get talking about the books. The first book I'm recommending is a very recent 5-star read for me, and that is The Correspondent. This was actually a book that you guys recommended to me, and I cannot thank you enough. This was a phenomenal read and will probably be one of my favourite reads of the year, even though we are literally just in February. We are following Sybil. She's in her 70s and we follow her for about a decade, but it's told completely through letters and emails that she is sending people. Sybil writes letters to literally everyone. She'll write it to her friends, her family, strangers, customer service reps, lecturers at universities, authors she loves. She loves writing letters. It's truly a safe space for her, and that is how she loves to communicate with people. It starts out such a funny, light book. Just seeing the way she writes and getting to know her personality, it made me laugh so much at the start because she genuinely reminded me so much of my nana. And we really just get to see her reflect throughout these letters on her entire life, on regrets she has, on people and things that she's lost throughout her life. We just get to know her as a person, and I feel like that is what made the book so great, is she genuinely felt so human to me. She felt like such a real person. It was so honest and honestly like devastating. I was inconsolable by the end of this book because it really was just so honest in the way that it addresses fears that I think we all have about life, but it left you with such a positive perspective on things. I feel like you really got that good balance of it being absolutely devastating and being like, oh my god, this is so sad, whilst also being like, do you know what, this like gave me hope for tomorrow and gave me hope for the future. It was only 270 pages as well, which I think it can be kind of hard sometimes to strike the balance between a book being short and it being really well developed and well done. It reads so quickly because you're starting a new letter or email every like 2 pages, so it almost feels like the chapters are really short. I cannot recommend this enough, guys. If you're in a book slump, this is the exact book I feel like would take you straight out of it. Next we have The Favourites, which is a book I honestly cannot believe it took me so long to read, because this is just right up my street. Everyone has been telling me to read this for so long, and now I totally understand why. We meet these two extremely notorious, infamous ice skaters. They were ice dance partners and they were absolutely huge at the time. They were some of the best skaters in the world. More than anything, they were notorious for all their public scandals, had this very on and off relationship. Each chapter, the perspective change between a documentary, which is like telling the story of their life, and then the second POV is from Kat. She is the girl in this partnership and she is actually telling it from her perspective. We're getting the truth of what happened behind the scenes. The way the story is told in the first place is just so good. The depth that adds to it in this documentary, which is obviously the public's perspective of what happened and them like trying to piece together what really was going on behind the scenes, versus actually getting Kat's perspective. And I personally just loved following along Kat's POV so much. I'm a Kat apologist. Kat is perceived as this ruthless, ice cold dancer because she is just so focused on winning, and it makes her look heartless. And obviously you can imagine as well, it's back in the early 2000s and she's a woman in ice skating, so you can imagine the press had an absolute field day with that. I personally loved her as a character. I understood her so much. She couldn't be more different from me, honestly, but I just understood her so much and I was rooting for her the entire time. And then you've got her partner Heath, who she grew up with. They both came from very rough backgrounds, and so they kind of had to claw their way to the top, which also I really appreciated. Her and Heath just want very different things, and so it makes for a very toxic, tumultuous relationship, but it also just made it incredibly entertaining. I loved following along with this. The side characters in this were so good. They were so complex. There was no one who was a completely perfect character, which I really appreciated, but you also grew to become really fond of the characters as well. Guys, it was just so good. Like honestly, the drama was next level. I really could not imagine you reading this and still being in a book slump after it, because it is so fast paced. You just need to keep turning the page. Part of this book I listened to as an audiobook as well, and I would definitely recommend that because I feel like it added a lot. I love this. This is phenomenal. I cannot believe it took me so long to read this. Then we're switching it up. If you're in the mood for kind of like a thriller or sci-fi or just a fast-paced book, I would recommend Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I am really not much of a thriller or sci-fi girl, but I genuinely adored this book. This was a 5-star for me. We start this book with Jason, who is cooking dinner with his wife and son on a Thursday night. It's their little tradition, and you can tell he's very happy in his life. He definitely does have that lingering question of like, what if I never gave up my career to be a parent, because he was a very successful researcher, I believe, like scientist. He gave that up to have a child. He leaves the dinner to nip out to the shops, and long story short, he basically wakes up in an alternate universe where he never gave up his career to be a parent. He does not have a son. His wife is not his wife. It's basically this concept of the multiverse, where there are infinite universes out there where you made infinitely different choices or just slightly different choices. It means you're living an entirely different life, and that's what Jason is trying to get through all these universes to get back to his original one. It honestly freaked me out. Like, it was so trippy to think about that, but I also just appreciated the message of the book and the kind of lesson Jason was learning of how appreciative he was of his actual life. There's a quote in the book that's like in reference to his wife, and he's like, out of all the universes, I am so glad that I am in this one with you. Even though the whole multiverse theory was like tripping me out so much, and it definitely is so crazy like reading through it in this book, I just think like it made me feel so appreciative to be in the universe that I'm in right now. Even though it is much more of like a thriller sci-fi vibe, like it actually does leave you with quite a nice message, which I definitely didn't expect. This was just one of those books where I could not stop turning the page. I had to know what was going to happen, and I honestly loved the way this book ended. I felt like it was a very satisfying ending, because as the book's going on, you're like, literally, how is this going to get resolved? But I thought this was just such a well done book. I'm pretty sure it's a TV show now as well, which I'll definitely need to check out because I've heard good reviews about that as well, but I honestly cannot recommend this enough. The next book I'm going to recommend is for any of my girlies who loved Dance Mums growing up, because me personally, like to this day, Dance Mums shaped me as a person. Like, I genuinely think that is god tier reality TV. I grew up watching it, I was absolutely obsessed, and I'm still obsessed with it to this day. So a book I would recommend for you would be The Real Deal by Caitlin Devlin. It basically is like a Dance Mums retelling. We follow this group of girls who were on this dance, or I think it might have been like child actors, reality TV show growing up, and we're following it from the perspective of Belle, who was kind of like the Maddie of the show. Like, she was this favourite, and so that made her like kind of hated by the public and picked on by the other girls. We actually get like the reality from her and the behind the scenes of what was actually going on. We get 2 timelines of the past, of getting her perspective of what actually was going on, and present day, where they're having a reunion all these years later. It's just so interesting to follow along with. Obviously it's fiction, but I think there's so much truth to the story of how she was talking about the way things were produced and edited to build a storyline. It wasn't necessarily the reality or like super authentic to what was happening in real life, but it sold the show and it made it interesting for people. I absolutely adored this. I thought it was such an interesting storyline. The next recommendation I have is if you are looking for a book that is gonna absolutely rip your heart out, make you literally sob, but at the same time just reignite your love for reading, because it genuinely feels like you are watching a movie play out on screen, but it's actually just in your mind, you need to read Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If there is anyone who still hasn't read this book, let this be your sign that this will genuinely be one of the best books you ever read in your life. We are following Joan, who's part of this NASA program to be one of the first women to go to space. In the first chapter of this story, we are seeing Joan in present day. She is a commander on Earth for a spaceship that's up in the air. Something really bad is happening to the ship that's up in space. At this point, we don't know anything about the crew. We just know that this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to Joan, but we don't really understand her emotional connection to these crew members yet. But the story is told from those 2 perspectives of present day and then the flashbacks to when she first joined this program, her working in NASA with all these crewmates. We're getting to know all the other side characters, her relationships to them. I just adored following this story along from Joan's perspective. Joan is genuinely one of my favourite main characters I have ever read about in a book. Like, I genuinely just felt so maternal towards her. I understood her so much, I respected her so much. I just thought she was such an amazing person to read about. But she just went through so much in this book, honestly. At times I was cheering for her, at times I was crying for her. The ending of this book is one of the most devastating things I've ever read. Like I said, I genuinely could see that final scene playing out in my mind like a movie, and I'm someone who really struggles to picture things in books. Not with this. I feel like the best way I can describe it to people is if you've seen the movie Interstellar. The plot is not the same, but obviously you've got the space aspect of it, and just like the cinematic masterpiece that is, that's how I feel about this book. If you guys are looking for just a really good fiction story, Kristen Hanna is an amazing author for this. She is genuinely such a fantastic storyteller. The way her writing is just so like fast paced and so immersive. Like when I'm reading her books, I just feel so immersed in the world and the characters. I think she's just a great author in general to be reading if you're trying to get out a book slump or just read books that are a little bit out of your comfort zone of like the typical romance fantasy bubble. I'm gonna recommend you my favourite one of hers that I've read, and that is The Great Alone. The Great Alone follows Lenny, who grows up in a bit of a tumultuous family. One day her dad is just like, we're moving to Alaska. So the family gets up, they move to Alaska, and it's in this very rural, isolated area, which to be fair, a lot of Alaska is like that. You kind of get these two parallels of Lenny, who is really kind of loving life there. Like when she moves there, she settles in really well. She loves the nature, the environment, she makes really good friends, she's happy there, but simultaneously her home life is getting so much worse and more dangerous because of the isolation that her family is in. Firstly, I think the setting of this book was phenomenal. I don't know if you guys know this, I am obsessed with Alaska. I don't know why, I just think Alaska is one of the most interesting places in the world. I wouldn't survive a day there, but I am like obsessed with it. Getting to read about that, I really felt so immersed in it, and also the community that Lenny has there was just so great to read about as well. The story itself was just so moving. You never kind of knew which way it was going to go. It was one of those books I read so fast because I couldn't put it down, and I have never stopped thinking about it since reading it. The last book I would recommend to you guys is Wild Dark Shore. Wild Dark Shore is a book that has a bit of a slower start. It kind of takes its time to get into it, but genuinely the last 40% of that book is so good, and so you absolutely have to understand what is going on. It's basically set on this very isolated island. The only people that live there is a dad and his 3 children. One day a girl washes up on this shore. She's barely alive, and so they take her in to look after her and nurse her back to health. But they're obviously asking like, how did this girl get here? Like, this is such an isolated island, you don't kind of end up here by accident. So once she's back to health, they're trying to figure out that, but at the same time the girl is trying to figure out what is going on with this family. She can tell there's a lot of secrets. She can tell that they're kind of hiding stuff from her as well. Naturally they are getting closer. The more time they spend each other, they're becoming more attached, but they also don't fully trust each other, and you as the reader, you're not sure who to trust. Going into this book, I kind of thought it was more of a thriller. It definitely has that feel at the start, but as we go through the book, it is more like fiction. A lot of very important themes that are being discussed. I think a big theme was just like looking after each other. A big topic is like the environment and what's actually happening to the island. I think I just didn't expect it to take the turn that it took. Like I said, I went into it thinking this was going to be like some crazy thriller and that everyone's a villain. I felt like it actually went a lot deeper than that, which I really appreciated. There's a quote in here that says, maybe we will drown or burn or starve one day, but until then we get to choose if we will add to that destruction or if we will care for each other, which I feel like was a huge overarching message of the book, which I really appreciated. And honestly, the ending had me in tears. Once we were in the thick of the story, I was just so invested in the characters and what was happening to them and what was happening to the island. It was just a book where I have never read anything like it before, and it was so refreshing because of that. Like, it was just so out my comfort zone, and I ended up really enjoying it. So I think that's a really nice book if you feel like you're just reading the same types of book over and over again, because this was so different. I think the fact that it had that thriller mystery element to it, but also fiction and just the connection that the characters all had, it was really nice. So that is definitely one that you need to get to. But anyway, if you're in a book slump, I hope these book recommendations help you get out of it. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in next week's video.